All right, dope. All right, so we have the folks from Sepasoft up here. They're obviously is it Diamond partner? What kind of
Diamond,
partner?
yeah.
Diamond partner with inductive automation. You guys developed the original MES modules. I actually cut all of my ignition MES teeth on OEE 1.0 on the original MES modules with Sepasoft. I learned personally a lot about doing manufacturing execution on Sepasoft's modules. I do know the direction they're going with this presentation, which is actually very interesting. Actually, can we put the QR code up on the screen? Yeah, so if you can scan that now. If you guys have any questions, you can put the questions in as they're presenting. They've got about 30 minutes. They're going to answer the question, what is the problem that the customer has, our virtual factory has, that they would solve? How did they solve it? How many man hours did it take? How much did it cost? And then they're going to answer any of your questions. I will not interrupt unless something really interesting pops up that I just must ask you. So, all right, with that, welcome Sepasoft.
All right.
Thanks.
So we've got a couple of slides. I'm not sure if you want to throw those up when you have an opportunity. But yeah, I'm Doug Brandl. This is Mark French.
Thanks. And our problem statement, the CEO gave us a call after the board meeting. We have to get AI in use in our virtual factory before the end of the year, right?
Yeah, this is a real-world scenario. We're engaging with people presently having this exact same problem. The funds are there. The mandate is there. These companies, they've got mature automation spaces. They're using Ignition. They're using unified namespaces, data brokers, and all sorts of other modern technologies. So the technology is there. The tools are, the technology and the tools are not there for this AI initiative. The expertise and the understanding are also not there.
The presenting problem is that they get, garbage results. And we all know the computing rule of garbage in, garbage out. And what we're finding with customers, real-world customers, isn't just a straw man, right? It's a Fortune 500 company. The AI problems and the data problems actually amplify errors in analysis and in access.
So there was a recent MIT study that came out, and it kind of hit a lot of the news. I'm sure many people saw it. And effectively, they said 95% of all generative AI initiatives have failed in business, and only 5% have succeeded. And if you go to the bottom of the study, they give you some conclusions about, how can we not be in the 95%? What do we need to be in the 5%? And the very first sentence in the conclusion, I'm going to read this off of my notes here. It says, organizations that successfully cross the Gen AI divide do three things differently. They buy rather than build, empower line managers rather than central labs, and select tools that integrate deeply while adapting over time. If you guys saw our presentation yesterday on the main stage, that's kind of the message that we've been pushing, and that's what we're hoping to show you, the problem that we're going to solve with the data that we have and the solutions that we offer.
So connecting to the UNS and the virtual factory, this is our path for how we're going to address this from a data perspective. We're going to apply standardized process control using Ignition and our Sepasoft batch procedure module. Based on that structure, we then have reliable structured data to whatever consumers, whatever other applications are interested. And then, of course, we're beating the garbage in, garbage out problem when we expose that data to our AI and ML tools at the far right. So real quick overview of the architecture. I don't have to go into depth on the ProveIt virtual factory. You guys have heard all about it. In the center here, we have Ignition with the batch procedure module installed. We also have a simulated PLC for our batch process. We're going to talk about that with the press. And then on the far right, we have a SepaIQ server talking to Ignition and also talking to a ChatGPT instance.
All right, let's get into Ignition. So you'll have to excuse me while I Alt-Tab here through. And hopefully the displays work. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so The frame, what I'm trying to emphasize in the first part of the demo here is in order to get to that endpoint, you really have to structure your data. You have to structure your processes, and you need to capture it in consistent ways. And this is a great opportunity to show off the batch procedure module. We're doing both ISA 88 batches, and we're doing 95 workflows. So first things first, we'll go ahead and just go in. I want to show you that we're capable of handling real-world scenarios, real-world recipes, and workflows. But when we get into the demo portion, it's way too much to try and do in 30 minutes. So I have a simplified, kind of a generic one that will help get us through it. So in this first one, we're simulating the press operation. I've simplified it down a little bit. You've got an unwinder, which is unwinding substrate. You have the press, which is actually doing all of the pressing. And then you have the rewinder, which is rewinding that substrate back. And it's managing the wind up. Now, I'll just take a look at this press unit procedure here. Inside this, we've got like a setup document, some e-signatures. We're using our doc viewer to structure the document. We're capturing all of this data back through our electronic batch record. We're managing parallel steps, doing equipment phases, synchronizing across units. You can even get crazy and go and manage all of your IPCs and the timers for those included here. So you can track all of this back in that electronic batch record. But that's not the one we're going to go through. That's a little complicated. Let's do something a little bit simpler. And so this is just a generic print example. And we have an unwinder, which is simply waiting for an action from the press, and it's managing some tension. We have a press. This is, like I showed you before, it's not just a glorified checklist, but in this case, it is. We're going to show up the setup document. We're going to run some predictions, and I'm going to loop that back into the process. I don't know if we're going to have time to show the predictions in machine learning. We'll see what we can do with the time we have. And then we're going to actually run the press. We're going to look at the data that's coming back, and we're going to discuss some of the problems that you see with some normal architectures that we've encountered.
All right, so this example is related to the virtual factory. However, we're not using a lot of data from the virtual factory for the recipe execution. We're contained within the batching system. We're going to show how that connects practically to the virtual factory here in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
As Doug brings up the batch queue, he's going to select the place in the plant, the process cell, where this is going to run. He's going to select the appropriate recipe or routine. Oh, sorry?
No, you're good. Sorry.
Okay. We're going to give you one more look at the setup of a recipe within the queue. And notice he's also selecting, here in a second, the formula. So a formula is a collection of parameter values. You could think of them as set points. And that has its own versioning scheme that allows us to use the same routine or recipe to deliver multiple different products based on the details of these settings. So one more way that we can rapidly, manage configuration and roll out a solution.
I have a quick question, Mark. So, formulation, is that based? So, for that specific recipe, are you loading the formulation based on the last successful formulation of that recipe, or does the recipe definition stay the same? So, if I delta from the recipe, if I make a change as an operator, am I writing that back to the recipe, or am I just capturing it as a diff from the recipe?
So you get to decide per parameter if it's sticky to the last execution.
Okay.
So if you want it to override and then new version with your latest value, you can set that per parameter. If you want it to be, no, this is what it is, it's written in stone, this is what you're running, you have that option as well.
And we could also set up an approval process where that diff gets sent to a process engineer for review, whether or not they want to make it sticky.
Yes,
Okay.
And that's recorded in the MES object change log, who did it, what server they did it from, what the old and new value is, timestamp, et cetera.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we've made a lot of improvements to the batch procedure module over the past year to kind of support a lot of the regulated industries. You need to know who, what, where, when, why for every change, and we've incorporated that back into the batch module.
All right, we're running the batch.
I've created it. Sorry, my keyboard decided it didn't want to work anymore, but I got it working again. All right, so let's head over to the recipe controller.
Okay, so out-of-the-box component to visualize this data and also provide manual control.
Yep. So yeah, let's take a look. We saw it earlier. I'm going to slide out our recipe monitor so we can see. I'm much more of a visual person than the digest view. I think it just looks prettier. It makes more sense to me. So I can see here I'm waiting on my setup document, and so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go open up that setup document. This is that same one that we saw earlier. Now, I'm capturing all these values, and these are being captured to the electronic batch record and are informing the rest of the batch. So we have parameterization of batch parameters, so I can tie them to what I put in here. That can drive the process itself. So again, the guise of this is we are structuring the data. We're structuring our execution data. We're not just throwing things out piecemeal. All right, so we've now done that, and our unwinder here is managing the tension. If I click through, I can see I've got a simple process value that's kind of moving around around a tension set point, and we're capturing all those values. And again, as Mark had mentioned, you have all sorts of options with these parameters. You can track the most recent one. You can track all of them to the history. We're not trying to be a historian for batch, but you do have a lot of opportunity to make this work for your recipes. All right. So,
All right, now during the execution, all of this is being recorded to the electronic batch records. Here in a second, Doug's going to bring up the EBR viewer, out-of-the-box component, which exposes this information. Of course, you can tailor to some degree how you want things recorded. Do I want every value recorded to the EBR, just the last value, that sort of thing. And so that's all there. Of course, this is also exposed to Python scripting functions within Ignition, so you could hook this up to your API, send it wherever it needs to go, and you see there's also export features on screen.
Yeah, and this is just a JSON object. This is human-readable format, and it's easy for all sorts of IT applications to consume. So I want to pull up, if I can get out of here.
Are you going
to pull up, yeah, the MQTT Explorer. So this is the ProveIt MQTT Explorer, and what I've done is I've just got it publishing all of the ISA 88 phase information. I know that I could do this as a JSON object. I think it looks more impressive if I separate out the topic each. But you can also do this with a full JSON object. So in this case, this is the last batch electronic batch record. You can see here our tension on our unwinder is bouncing around. There it is, the tension process value, and our duration's counting up. So we're capturing all of these parameters. But one of the problems that you run into if you approach pushing this data up in this method is that it's really hard to tell the story of the execution of that recipe. It's hard to figure out what's important and what's not. It's a little bit of drinking from the fire hose. I think it's like akin to looking at the Matrix, and you've got all of the green icons coming down the screen, and I can see Neo in there. I can figure out what's happening. But it's a challenge. And you run into the scenario where upstream, you push this data up to an enterprise level system, and you have a data scientist who now has to piecemeal together your production realities. And your data scientist has probably never been to a shop floor, has never seen the actual production. They're so removed from it that it's hard to drive the insight. They don't have the knowledge and the expertise in the space.
We're not here to trash data scientists. They have great personality. Thanks, I'll be here all week. Tip your waitress. All right, so we're also not here to trash the UNS. UNS is great. It's fantastic at moving data everywhere that it needs to be, light, fast, scalable. But like Doug said, for this type of data, we have a contextualization problem, and we have a problem with things like data change. Mm-hmm. And we also have the downstream issue of properly leveraging it with AI. So let's take a look at changing this data based on user inputs.
Yeah, Mark, it looks like you forgot to put in some scrap on batch 333. Yeah, this is a problem. We're in manufacturing. Manufacturing is a messy business. A lot of the times you're dealing with people. We try to help that with our workflow engine and our batch engine, but data comes in late. You have test results that come in late. You have operators who forget steps, or not forget steps, that's what the batch engine's for, but they forget to input numbers, maybe after the fact. In this case, we're doing some post facto data entry. If you want to structure that in a standard UNS, you have to be very inventive, and you have to handle all of the cases that you can imagine. You've got maybe some active step topic that you can push updates on. But again, at the end of the day, you're relying on data scientists removed from the process in order to incorporate those old data, that old data change, into their analysis.
So you need a value. Walker,
Yes.
what's the value between 1 and 10,000? Integer.
7,777.
All right.
That's a lot
Strong.
of scrap. So you see here, as we updated that value, I'm pushing that value up into SepaIQ. SepaIQ is kind of what we're naming it an extended UNS. We have the source data. We have all of the records as they come through, that same concept of the data that you see in the MQTT broker. But on top of it, what we do is we provide a whole suite of analysis to that raw data. We're trying to enable you to take that diamond that you have and look at it from all the different facets and interpret the data differently. So when we put in that scrap value, we have one analysis up here. This is the last 3 months of scrap. This is being calculated out of SepaIQ. The whole screen is coming out of SepaIQ, and it's performing yield calculations. We can do a whole lot more than that, but we've only had this for I think we did this over 3 weeks, so it pretty quick. You could really flesh this out. All right. Sorry, you have to excuse me. I've got my notes here because yesterday was a long day for us too. So.
Yeah, so takeaway here, XUNS, contextualized data, correctable data, multifaceted. We've got subscriptions set up automatically within SepaIQ so that anybody that relies on calculations or predictions that depend on those raw values automatically get the update when the source value changes. And just one other thing, I didn't think I was going to be the change log guy in the presentation, but there is a data change log built into this product so that somebody does author a change to that raw data, that is recorded. Somebody does make an edit to the data, that is recorded. So we have auditability, not just of the configuration of the analytics platform, but also the underlying data.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So we'll step into SepaIQ here. So SepaIQ is a bit more of like an administrative configuration tool. It's meant to be consumed by other applications. And so we're going to go walk into the language model settings. I want to show you guys this. So we're taking it up to the next level. We've got our data. It is structured. We've pushed it into SepaIQ. We're performing all sorts of analysis on it. Now we want to be able to interrogate. Our CEO is called, and she really needs this, ASAP. Needs it by the end of the year. So we can configure a couple of different types at the moment. We're constantly expanding this. I mean, everybody knows this is a really quickly moving field. And we're leveraging tooling at the moment. I know MCP has been thrown around a lot. It's a pretty hot topic, and that's something that we're going to incorporate as well. But at the moment, what we've done is we've enabled tooling. Now, tooling's a really neat concept. It lets you configure your subscription to your language model. You can do this on a local one if you're running a local language model, or you can do it through the web. So in this case, we're using OpenAI and GPT 4.1 Mini. And you expose the analysis, explicitly expose the analysis that you want to see in SepaIQ to your language model. And then when you make a query, you pass that query up through SepaIQ. We pass that on to your configured language model. And that language model interprets. This is what it's for, right? It's all about natural language processing. It's not about crunching numbers and doing the math. That's what we're doing. We're the ones who provide that context. We just want to be able to ask real questions and get real answers back. So we pass that question up to ChatGPT. ChatGPT comes down. It looks and sees all of the analysis that I've exposed and I've described and all of the parameters that are available. And it then goes in and it picks what it needs to execute. We form the response and we send it back up. And that flows all the way back down into Ignition. So I'll show you what some of those analyses, what the tools we've configured are. In this case, I've got some summaries, batch summaries. I've got some scrap predictions. Hopefully, if we have time, maybe we can get to it, the predictive analytics and machine learning. We've got just some other ones, scrap by day, some aggregated batch data by material vendor, et cetera. And for each of these, you have the option of explicitly exposing parameters. Maybe I want to forbid requests that can fill in certain parameters, or I want to really kind of limit. So this gives you ultimate flexibility. It's the concept of effectively whitelisting those parameters. And you can also intercept what ChatGPT sends, or whatever your language model sends, to SepaIQ. So in this case, we've got just a simple JavaScript thing that's taking 4 lines of JavaScript, and it takes a UTC string and it just converts it to milliseconds since epoch. Because guess what? ChatGPT doesn't know how to do that when you type it in. I tried. That's why this exists. I stored all of my data as milliseconds since epoch. It's a convenient way to store it for time series data. And you run into problems, and this is a really good way to try and mitigate some of that. You might even have your production environment set up where you don't have any spaces in your line names. But somebody, when they ask, they're going to type out a space. So this is a good way to kind of cater that response.
You can see that we've got these practical tools to make it accessible. A single one of these little mix-ups completely, unfortunately, at the current state of AI, it's brittle enough that breaks the entire chain of analysis, right?
Yeah.
So we've got those practical tools built in, very, very accessible, easy to use.
So we'll ask it a couple of questions, and we'll talk about it a little bit. So first one, which day, if I can type, in February, did I produce the most scrap? Can you give me a detailed summary of the worst batch that day?
Just once, I want an LLM to respond with, yes, I can. Nothing
It's a little
else.
too literal.
Just, yes, I can.
Think
Yeah.
harder.
Oh, I don't have any recorded scrap on that day. All right, well, let's ask it. Let's
Well-
ask it a question. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
This is not a bug, this is a feature, right? Okay, so a lot of work has gone in to make sure that we mitigate hallucinations, fake data, incorrect data. That's not okay in this context, right? We can't spitball it. There has to be real data, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually really important.
Yeah. So, this one, in April 2025, and again, unfortunately, when you're talking to these language models, you have to specify that full date because guess what? ChatGPT 4.1 mini thinks the latest date is 2024, right? So these things aren't perfect. These things are constantly growing and expanding. I'm sure if I asked ChatGPT 5.0, we'd get some slightly different flavor of response. But what this has done is this has actually gone out to SepaIQ. It's gone through that process that we showed. And I'll go into SepaIQ and show you what we're actually seeing here. So we have this exposed through the API. So whenever you ask a question, we're exposing the analysis that gets executed against SepaIQ because this is new technology. Not everybody trusts it. Sometimes it hallucinates. We're really well aware of that, and we're doing whatever we can to mitigate it. So if we go into the log here, I can see everything that it did. So I see the large language model tool requests come through. I'm seeing the actual analysis that's getting returned. I'm seeing all of the parameters that the language model is passing to us. This is for visibility, as much visibility as we can have.
Yeah, so I think, taking that next step, it's not just a roll of the dice, let's hope the LLM gives me the answer I want, right? You've got the chain of what we're sending, what it's sending back, how we're processing it, execution times, it's all there so you can diagnose it, you can troubleshoot it, right? Because again, we're building this for production manufacturing use.
I got a question, Mark. So
Yes, sir.
Those are MCP tools that you're building? Or are they?
So right now it's ChatGPT tools. I'm not
Okay.
entirely sure where the MCP it fits in that.
Okay, so so these are GPT tools. Number two, are you planning on essentially allowing us to pass an argument in where we can see the reasoning happening, what you're putting in the log?
Yeah. So we have an API that can do that. I haven't integrated it into this this specific window. We had a webinar earlier in the year where we were doing that, where we would ask a question and I would also bring back the full data set and then we would chart it so that you could see the question and then we would see a pie chart or a line chart of the data that it was referencing in the response.
And then the last thing, I know this question will come up, do you plan to support external agents, so not just an agent running in SepaIQ, but external, like using Claude Desktop to
Yeah, we're keeping our finger on the pulse. This is all new technology, and we want to be on the forefront. We're not of the mindset where, this is our lane. We're going to stay in it. Our mindset is these are really useful tools that we can all leverage. And so when we find the use case and we find a good reason that's really enticing, we'll put the effort forward to do that.
Sweet, rocking.
Yeah.
And just a couple things real quick. We're showing the graphical configuration panel. Of course, all of the configuration is API accessible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and another cool thing about the large language model is when you ask it a question, these things are smart. You can ask it a question that chains requests together. So it'll take the answer of one request, plug it in as a parameter to another request, take the answer from that and plug it into other things. And you can see that whole chain in the log. It's really impressive. You can ask it complicated questions. For this example, I've only set up like 5 or 6 of those tools. If I were doing this in the real world, I'd probably have 30 or 40 different tools to really make it robust and a lot more reliable in the answers.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Do you want to give it a prompt that does a little what if?
Yeah, so we did a prompt earlier. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste this, guys, because my typing skills are not very good. So let's go ahead and clear that. We're going to ask it, give me the work order detail for this one batch that we had done earlier. All right, so we got some details on it. Now this is, again, just what I've exposed. Now let's just go ahead and chain it. And I'm going to ask it to do some what ifs. I'm going to ask it to predict, if I can copy, there we go.
Control C.
Yeah.
Thanks, I'll be here all week.
So based on that work order, I want you to go against our prediction model. So we're running XGBoost. We've trained some prediction models. What we've done is we actually have 3,000-ish of the historical work orders from the ProveIt Virtual Factory MES Lite database. And we pulled those in, and then I rammed them through our batch product. It's quite a bit of them, and generated enough kind of like noise. And I set up some of these features, so like substrate material class, speed set points. I've got like 5 or 6 of these. And I trained the model on that. And now what we can do is we can start saying like, well, let's run what ifs. What if I need to, we've got our scheduling tool that we announced earlier, but let's presume that I want to really optimize for minimizing my waste. I can do that here. I can run these predictions through our language model. I've got a separate window that I can do if we have time. Do you think we have time? Walker, do we have time to?
You have time.
Perfect.
4 minutes, 50
happen
seconds.
for you.
I'll take it. Yeah, so we have a machine learning window. So these are the work orders that were in the virtual factory, and then I simulated a ton of data, and I generated all sorts of scrap. Now, this is all out of SepaIQ. This table is all out of SepaIQ. You can see it's sizable, 58 of these tables. So let's go ahead and run the machine learning model, and let's run it from January to April. So it's going to filter the data down. I'm going to hit the button, and there we go. We've processed 8,676 rows. Now there's more. It's not just those batches here. It's also there's variability and standard deviation along the scrap that I'm throwing in here. And what we can see here is the scores. So in machine learning, you have this, in XGBoost, you have this concept of scores. This is kind of indicating to you what is going to affect your label the most. So in our case, our label is the scrap that we're producing. And these scores are saying that our speed is the biggest factor in increasing our scrap, followed by material vendor, substrate, material class, and shift. And then I can just go ahead, plugging it back into SepaIQ, I can plug in various parameters and run all of the what ifs. And then on top of that, we can also do that in the language model.
I'm not speeding you up, I'm asking a question. Is XGBoost the only model right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
it is the one that is also best fit for manufacturing in general. We looked at a couple of them, and everything that we can find kind of suggests that XGBoost works really well with the type of data that you get from manufacturing. We also do sentiment analysis, which is around speech and text. So you can train words that people type. Like we have an example where we use operator comments against line OEE And we can say like, we can see that the operators are getting frustrated with the equipment and our OEE is dropping. And that lets you kind of be a little more forward-looking about, maybe we can step in and address this before we actually realize any of that loss. Yeah. So we'll do 600 and a quantity of 10,000. So this goes out, it runs the analysis against SepaIQ, gives us a predicted scrap percentage and a scrap amount. And then we can also see how good of a fit it is. I have an analysis, a generic analysis page here, where I can look at my predicted scrap versus my actual scrap. Again, we're ripping this all out of SepaIQ and sticking it here. So I have to excuse that I didn't have a ton of time to organize the columns, but I can see deviation of my scrap. I'm relatively close. I'm predicting, within a couple of percentage points for most of these and landing there. So yeah.
So do you want to go to our wrap-up slides here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about some takeaways. We use Sepasoft batch procedure module to provide us some data context and structure and give us consistent execution, right? Leveraging this with SepaIQ, we use the extended UNS for extended contextual UNS, correctable, multifaceted, trustworthy, right? We showed predictions and ML tools within SepaIQ, easy to configure with driving real-world outcomes, and then we integrated that with an external LLM so that we had natural language processing and we had trusted data, including predictions through that interface. So now, how much did it cost?
Yeah. So
what did it take?
So we split this up into two things where we're using two of our products. We have our batch procedure module, which is 31.5. It sits on top of Ignition, runs in Ignition, and you've got the same unlimited tags, user screens, et cetera.
Hold on. That's a one-time perpetual price.
One time, yes.
Support is optional, highly recommended.
It's encouraged, yes.
Yeah. So let's not abandon our solutions, right? Let's maintain them.
And then SepaIQ, which, so we announced it yesterday. We've got, we not only have our premium version of SepaIQ, we also have tiers, and this is the mid-tier version, which at the moment we've got it priced at $30,000 per year, which includes support.
And this is for a 2-server cluster. So our SepaIQ pricing, we've got small, medium, large, basic, plus, premium. And then based on the number of servers in your cluster, which is going to be driven by your needs, volume and frequency of data, number of predictions and frequency of model training, stuff like that. So we've got a sizing activity that we have to perform. But for 2 servers, annual subscription, that was $30K for this tier.
And the question on SepaIQ, what form does SepaIQ take? So architecturally, if I were to look at a reference architecture, what would it look like?
Yeah, so it's a clustered, centralized data broker is kind of how we talk about it, and we see it in architectures. So it's clusterable, it sits off of Ignition. Our goal is to think of it as like sit above your MES and serve the enterprise.
Your vision, your go-to-market initially is on-prem, but supported in the cloud.
It runs in the cloud natively already.
Yeah, so wherever you want to put that Docker container is up to you.
On-prem, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything.
But the idea is, we want to be in the cloud.
But not ultimately, it makes the most sense to be in the cloud.
Not everyone's comfortable yet.
There are applications for SepaIQ on-prem, especially with that lower tier. So, I'm running it on a laptop. He's running it on a laptop. I mean, so it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
this is like a Docker container with like 2 gigs of memory. It runs pretty lean, and it's still incredibly performant. I mean, it was crunching quite a bit of data.
So when you say the tiers, is that tiers mean horizontal and vertical scale? Like, so you're clustering across containers then? Okay, got it. All right, good. All right, perfect.
And then to answer the question of how long it took me about 3 weeks to do. About 75% of the time I spent in batch, trying to understand the process that we were going to do, try to figure out what we wanted to show you, configure the MES, author the recipes, set up the simulation for the phases and the equipment, and then build out the Ignition project. And then it was about 25% of the time in SepaIQ, building out the groups and the analysis, making sure that I was out getting everything grooving and putting in the data in the order in which it made the most sense, and then backfilling all of the ProveIt data for the machine learning. training the machine learning, and then integrating that large language model.
And also preparing to be on stage with me for 2 presentations at ICC, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So it wasn't, his only task in his week.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, you put the QR code up. We have questions we can start with already. But actually, I'll have you guys answer this, and then I'll give my answer again for those who weren't here for the Kanoa presentation yesterday. So obviously, Kanoa was asked yesterday, why Kanoa over Sepasoft? Because Sepasoft, when you think Sepasoft, you think manufacturing execution system. I think we really should get away from the term MES, and we really should talk more in terms of layer 3, L3. So that is above control, but because L3 and L4 are kind of merging together. L4 is where ERP is. They're kind of becoming together in their own layer. So, but the question was, why Kanoa over Sepasoft? So today is, why is Sepasoft over Kanoa?
Yeah, so I'll start. First, yesterday there was a discussion about the OE downtime module. Is it still viable? Is Sepasoft moving away from it? That sort of thing. I can understand why somebody could think that because we're showing batch and SepaIQ up front. This is just a consequence of us not being able to say all the things all the time. So we're not ignoring those products. It's just we're showing you new stuff that is in these products. So that's the first thing. Second thing, when we're comparing different vendors, I'm not an expert in all the other vendors in our space. I'm an expert in our stuff, and that's a full-time job as it is. So I'm not going to throw rocks and say, oh, these guys suck at this, and we're the best at that. What I would recommend is let's define clear requirements. We are happy to meet with you for free, review the requirements, and discuss with you very honestly and openly if our features and our products are a good match with those requirements. So if you want to enter into a requirements exercise comparing different vendors, I'll fill out the Sepasoft side of the table and meet with you as much or as little as you want to discuss it. And please feel free to do your due diligence with other vendors. And that's,
yeah, we're not here to throw shade on anybody else. We're all as part of this big community.
That's my job. I throw the shade. So I'll answer the question. So now, if you were here yesterday for the Kanoa presentation, what I said was that because of Sepasoft, so it's very important to understand, OEE is basically a commodity today. Like OEE it's not a destination, it's the starting point, it's a prerequisite. So what Kanoa was showing yesterday was an entry point through OEE to, quality management and scheduling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Sepasoft showed something that wasn't even an apples comparison today. It was a higher level use of L3 data. So my answer yesterday was, it's not really an appropriate comparison because it is an apples to apples, and Sepasoft is investing in other areas of L3 and L4 data, and hopefully you can see what that is. So where they overlap, they're probably even, and they've gone in other directions.
I can add one thing to that. So part of my role as a solutions engineer with Sepasoft is to work on developing some of the new ideas and new ways that we're building our products. And over the last year and probably through next year, I've got heavy development effort in the OEE space to try and flesh out our product. And I can't give, we didn't put it on the roadmap, but this is an appropriate time to mention it. So we've seen the issues with our OEE module when you put it in large environments and you're doing a lot of crunching on your ignition gateway. We acknowledge that there are some limitations with that architecture.
That's not a Sepasoft issue, that's a Java issue.
Yeah,
Java's
absolutely.
not designed to process that kind of data, especially if you're trying to calculate OEE over 12 months and you've got tens of millions or hundreds of millions of records to process. Java's not designed to do that, and that is a limitation of Java. That's not a limitation of Sepasoft's modules.
So you'll hear more next year at ICC next year of the various variations of OEE that we're going to be releasing. So for the moment, right now, we're focusing on batch, but I promise you I have a lot of work ahead of me and behind me.
And for those of you who are looking at MES, OEE is just a starting point. You shouldn't be saying the problem you're solving is not OEE. OEE is the very first step of the solution to the problem you're solving. And the mindset has to shift. Earlier this morning, I asked how many of you are calculating mean time to repair, and it was like 10% of the people in the room. everyone was tracking downtime. Nobody's tracking mean time to repair. Why track downtime if you're not going to calculate mean time to repair? It's really ridiculous. It's absurd. So at the end of the day, it's about turning data into decisions. So this is actually a good question, oddly enough. So why SEPA? So no one's seen Sorba AI present yet, their ProveIt session, so maybe we don't have the context. But why SepaIQ over HiByte or Sorba AI? And I would just say HiByte is, that Venn diagram intersects in a very small place. So
Okay, yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the HiByte. That was right before us, and we were.
he basically did scaffolded agents. So he had an agent
Yeah.
at the top coming down through a series of agents. Each agent was responsible for a different part of the reasoning.
Got it. Yeah, you know, the genesis for SepaIQ was really to let's tackle the analysis engine. Let's take this load off of Ignition. Let's bring it into a more modern framework. Let's use some more modern technologies. So SepaIQ at its core is a super high performance, very, very unbelievably quick analysis engine, and it's extremely flexible. So that is the core of the product.
And the contextualization question
Yes.
as well. And so we don't think we're going to be the only consumer, the only analytics, the only AI, connector in this game, right? So once we've done this work with the data, let's share it.
Yeah.
Let's use the best in class in these other areas.
I'll go ahead and answer our tools in SepaIQ sort of APIs for the LLM. Yes, they are APIs into Sepasoft's backend. AI agents can detect bad data in the UNS as shown at ProveIt in February. What does Sepasoft product do to detect bad data? That's a good question.
Yeah. What do we mean by bad data?
Data that can't be trusted. So that's an
Yeah.
anomaly.
Yeah.
That doesn't
So-
look right.
Yeah, one of the things that I did when I was developing this solution is I put in a lot of variability in the data that I was generating. And I didn't put it, there was only like a couple of units running in the virtual factory, so I had to simulate my own data because we're doing control of the environment. But one of the things that you can do is if you're careful and if you know what to look for, as part of the analysis, we've got a whole suite of calculators. So we can read the data and we can detect things that are anomalous. You can look at the standard deviation of various process values and say, hey, I want to trend this over time, and I can see spikes, I can see things that are off. And yeah, you can leverage that to try and have some insight in that.
And I think there's an important lesson here that not Sepasoft specific. The idea of the autonomous agent is a misnomer. I would not personally trust a large language model to produce the decision that would make an agent autonomous. Agents and human beings, that is a synergistic relationship. Think of the agent as a nail gun, and so you're graduating from the hammer to the nail gun. Just because you're using a nail gun to speed up the process of framing a home doesn't mean that you're going to ask the nail gun to do the inspection to make sure that the home is sound. That's the human being's responsibility. So just because the agent returns a result set doesn't necessarily mean that you should assume that result set is the final outcome. But you think about what he did, that he did in 30 seconds what it is it would take a human being, in some cases weeks, to do, right? But you're not asking the agent, you're not trusting the agent implicitly, it's a starting point. And I think that really needs to be in the forefront of everyone's minds.
I'll just add one more thing. Because we started with batch, I know it might seem like it was tangential. We've imposed a structure, right? And we've imposed a process and a workflow so that we can uncover those, the bad data, the missteps, the gaps on the front end as well. So it's not just on the back end; it's also on the front end.
There was a question in there, hey, Walker, don't bash Java because Android runs onto it or whatever. What is that? Okay. Android also doesn't process hundreds of millions of records over the course of 12 months. Java is very, very far. At the end of the day, the computation is done on the motherboard, and Java is a really long ways away from the motherboard. That's the reason it's slow. That's why you have to have a Java virtual machine. That's why you have to do garbage collection. Also, the JVM generally can't get bigger than 12 gig for the most part without losing efficiency. So Java itself you're not building high computational applications in Java. I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying you're not going to do $100 million records in 1 second using a Java application. How was the scrap on the header for the last 3 months calculated? That was good.
Yeah, so that was just a calculation on the group. So a group in SepaIQ is kind of, think of it as like your table of data that you define all of the columns and structure for. And so I time bucketed it. I put a filter on the time. This is a time series database. We're dealing in manufacturing. A lot of this is managed as time series data. And so that's how I minimize the computational overhead, is I can filter down that amount. But I could have run this on the entire history of it, and it would have returned in like 10 milliseconds later. I did it. I just wanted to show something that was a little more relevant.
So, Mark, they have Sepasoft batch running today with
Thank
real
you.
batch data.
Good work.
How long would it take to deploy and get tangible predictions or results from SepaIQ?
Yeah. So, what do you think, Doug?
I mean, from the actual aspect of configuring it in the tool, it's minutes. But then you have the task of training a prediction model. And there's a whole science behind it. When I did it for the demo, it turns out ChatGPT is way smarter than I am at this. And so you can take the prediction that you get. So you effectively, you get your features and your labels. You run it through the model. It gives you a whole suite of all of the decision trees that it's gone through. You can take that value, plug that into ChatGPT, and it will tell you this is how you can interpret the results. You may want to consider adjusting these hyperparameters to avoid some of the common problems that you run into in machine learning, where you're like overfit for certain things. So yeah, it's more of understanding your data, setting up the appropriate. You don't want to choose too many things. You don't want to throw the kitchen sink at it. You need to be a little judicious about things that will realistically affect the prediction. And so you need to limit that variable, those variables. And then you just start working it.
Solve a specific problem.
Yes.
Continue to remind yourself, what problem am I actually trying to solve? The primary driver of scope creep is losing focus on the problem. Here's a good one. How does SepaIQ address data access privileges by user, and how do I restrict access to data for specific user groups? And I would just, before you answer, outside of financial data, why would you want to restrict access within a facility? That's the question I would ask. Mm-hmm. So outside of financial data, why would you want to restrict the access? I understand why you want to restrict access based on the level in the organization, but anybody in a plant should have access to all data in the plant outside of HR and financial data. That is a mindset shift in data management. So the idea that you would restrict, but I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, two things. We do have some defense customers, and so sometimes we have
outside of regulatory requirements.
Yeah, so we might
HR,
have
financial.
regulatory where we have to split the plant, defense and civilian, that sort of thing. So in the in the release of the product that we use today, we don't have a lot of tools in there for this. However, Tom showed me, I don't know where Tom is, but anyway, there he is. So Tom showed me last week can I use the name?
We call it workspaces.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm going to use it. So workspaces.
Yeah.
So you can identify resources, for access control with id SepaIQ and say, okay, this data, these models, these calculations, these connectors are part of that workspace, and then that's part of my OpenID, et cetera.
Yeah.
And here, and this is a good question. I don't know if you've worked with, since it's a new product. I don't know how much you've worked with it, but this would only come from someone who's worked with SepaIQ quite a bit. But how does SepaIQ match the user prompt to the specific tag names? And what if the tags are cryptically named? So now I can tell that this is somebody who has a lot of experience of developers testing their own solutions. A developer should never test their own solution because we always build to optimal. So we test it the way we built it. You always want to have somebody else test it. So since you didn't build it and you can test it, actually
I'll try and answer it.
Yeah.
How about that? So SepaIQ is, it's this data broker. It sits above your MES level, and we're talking about tags here. So what I did in this project was I took our ISA 88 UDTs and I explicitly put a map in there, and I said, I want this tag to go to this group in SepaIQ whenever it updates, and I want it to go to this column. Now that was something that I managed when I did it. There's a million ways that you can do this, but that's all managed within Ignition. So SepaIQ, we've got various connectors to get data into SepaIQ. You can use MQTT to get data in. We have unmanaged databases, so we can read in data from other databases and consume that within SepaIQ. And in this case, I was just pushing data in through the API. And we have an interface module coming, so we have more native integration with Ignition. So when you want to push Ignition tag data, we'll have a mechanism to do that and map it into the appropriate group and into the appropriate columns.
And today there are tools in there to like rename and things like that, or other kind of filtering.
And you can alias the requests as well.
Absolutely.
So you can say I've got some cryptic name here, but on the analysis that I'm performing, I'm renaming it. I'm renaming the column that comes back.
And we'll go 2 more questions. So the example at SepaIQ prediction you demoed would traditionally be handled using multiple linear regressions to fit an equation. Yes, that's probably correct. Can SepaIQ output that equation?
Yeah, so when we run the prediction, I could probably pull it up and show you.
So for those of you who don't know linear regression, it's basically a model that says for every value X, what's the likely outcome Y? That's linear regression.
Yeah, so this is entirely dependent on XGBoost. So XGBoost is one of the most common ones, especially in manufacturing.
And one of the most performant.
Yes, exactly. And it breaks things out into nodes and trees. So it gives you a story. It's not exactly a mathematical linear regression because it takes decisions. It says once you get to this point, the regression changes fundamentally based off of the data. So it's a lot more complicated than just like a statistical linear regression or multivariate analysis. It's a lot more complicated than that and a lot more involved. So we export, or whenever you train in SepaIQ, again, I was doing it through the API because we're at ICC. I wanted to do everything natively in Ignition. But when you're in SepaIQ, we return that whole node tree back to you. So you can interpret that as you will.
There was another question in here. Keep going. Maybe it's down. Maybe it's down. Was that all the way at the bottom? There was another question that I wanted to ask, and then you moved. Oh, Ignition 8.1.
Oh, yeah. So SepaIQ lives off of Ignition. It is a standalone product. You can ingest data. In this case, I'm using Ignition 8.1. I'm not using Ignition 8.3 on our demo. I'm pushing the data through a REST API. This is all pretty easy and standard to do. So you don't have to upgrade. Now, when we get to 8.3, I think our interface module is on 8.3.
That
so
is
if you want the native interface and you don't want to have to manage the script library of our API to push the data, you have to move to 8.3.
So brokerless communication between Ignition 8.3 and SepaIQ, specific module for that, 8.3 only.
And because SepaIQ runs separate from Ignition, does that mean no 2-hour trial?
That is correct.
Okay. And one other question, we're about done, but it's brand new, right? So
Q1, it was released in Q1.
But who's your ideal customer profile? What are the projects that you're looking for? You're like, hey, these are going to be, we're going to slam dunk these.
Yeah, we're looking at enterprise initiatives. So we're looking at bringing in all of that democratized data and using it for valuable insights on kind of like the level 4, level 3, like in that.
So you had 4 months of data to work with in our back end.
Yes.
You're looking for somebody who has at least some.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a basic requirement here is that you are able to connect to your data. There is some structure to that data, and you have an idea of what you want to do with it.
By the way, it was a perfect use case you picked, by the way. I mean,
you.
it shows that you do application because it's the ideal use case. The executive says, hey, I've spent all this money on digital.
Yep.
Now it's time to convert all this data I have into some type of decision making, and let's do it quickly. So round of applause for the folks at Sepasoft. Very nicely done, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Very nicely
done.
done.
Thank you. Appreciate it.